Joining me now is Tom Perez. He is the White House Director of Intergovernmental Affairs and a senior advisor to President Biden. He also served as chairman of the DNC during the Trump administration and Secretary of Labor in the Obama administration. It's a long list. Good to have
thank
you.
It's great to be with you.
Well, I really appreciate your being here in person after a very busy week. President Biden delivered his State of the Union address. He hit the road. If you look at the polls, he didn't get that typical bounce that presidents like to see after the State of the Union, but he's been talking about his infrastructure bill, the Inflation Reduction Act. Are you confident that he is doing enough to keep that energy going after the State of the Union?
I thought the president knocked it out of the park in the State of the Union, and he has continued that momentum, Kristen. He's going around the country. The other day he was in Milwaukee talking about reconnecting communities. Infrastructure projects historically have had the ability to connect communities and to divide communities. And in Milwaukee, when they built the Interstate Highway 43 and 94 back in the early 60s, they literally took down 17,000 homes of black people in the community. They took down 1,000 businesses and really divided the community. And the investment there of $36 million and the investment nationally of $3 billion is all about making sure we are leaving no community behind, implementing the president's agenda of equity and opportunity. And that's what he's talking about in Wisconsin. That's what he's talking about in New Hampshire. It's what he's talking about all around the country, how we inherited a mess. We had a recession. And now we have record unemployment, record low unemployment, over 2 years, under 4%. Haven't seen that in 50 years. You know, $35 a month for insulin is resonating with a lot of people because it's changing their lives.
Let me ask you about some of the pushback that he's been getting on. Just talked about the fact that he was traveling these key battleground states, and there have been protesters who are expressing their disappointment with his handling of the war in the Middle East. You were at that meeting that I mentioned in Chicago yesterday. I want to put up a quote from a Palestinian-American Illinois state representative who skipped the meeting but had this to say, quote, "I met with Tom Perez in the White House in October, and there have been many other meetings that have been had. There's nothing new to be said. We need an immediate and permanent ceasefire, and we need the United States to stop supplying arms to Israel." What is your reaction to that type of criticism?
Well, I've met with folks in Michigan, and we met with folks yesterday in Chicago, and we're going to continue to meet with folks. People are suffering, they're hurt. The president in the State of the Union called for a ceasefire. He's called for a two-state solution. He has been relentless in his efforts to address the humanitarian crisis. Too many innocent women and children are dying, and he has been very explicit about that. And we're going to continue to talk to people so that we can listen and learn from them. And that's what the president's about. It's about making sure that we're moving forward in constructive ways.
What do you say, though, to these leaders and to these communities who say not enough is being done, that they want to see a permanent ceasefire? And I know that there are negotiations ongoing as we speak about trying to broker a potential temporary ceasefire, but they also say that the United States shouldn't be supplying more arms or more aid to Israel unless it's conditioned on a guarantee that Israel will do more to protect civilian lives.
Well, again, the president and the entire team has been working 24/7. Secretary Blinken and Jake Sullivan and others, day in and day out. We absolutely hear the concerns of our friends in Michigan, in Illinois, and across the country. And that's why the president has called for a 6-week ceasefire. That's why he has spoken with President Netanyahu, and that's why we'll continue to do this, because we recognize the fierce urgency of now.
I want to play a little bit of what Leader Chuck Schumer had to say on the Senate floor yesterday and get your reaction on the other side.
At this critical juncture, I believe a new election is the only way to allow for a healthy and open decision-making process about the future of Israel. Of course, the United States cannot dictate the outcome of an election, nor should we try. That is for the Israeli public to decide. A public that I believe understands better than anybody that Israel cannot hope to succeed as a pariah opposed by the rest of the world.
President Biden called this a good speech. Does the White House agree with Chuck Schumer that there needs to be a change at the top of Israel's leadership?
I mean, the president respects Senator Schumer's right to give that speech, and we're going to continue to work with the Israeli government, the Israeli people, and everybody in the region to forge an enduring ceasefire which will lead to a two-state solution and an end to the humanitarian crisis. That's exactly what the president is trying to do, and that's what we're going to continue to do.
Does the president, does the administration feel as though Prime Minister Netanyahu is listening to the president when he is delivering what has been described as these very blunt assessments of what the United States expects to see moving forward?
Well, we're going to continue to engage, and the national security team and the president himself will continue to engage on a day-to-day basis because we know the importance of this issue.
All right. Tom Perez, thank you so much. Really
Thank you.
appreciate your joining me. It's great to see you in person.
Thanks for watching. Stay updated about breaking news and top stories on the NBC News app or follow us on social media.